Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with random reviews from the War Room, where I'm busily unpacking piles and piles and piles of things. I just came up from the basement, and there's like lots and lots of boxes down there, too. And I really asked the movers to put all of the CDs that came from my original big shelves in my living room in this room, and they really stacked the room up, but it turns out that they threw a lot of them in the basement, and they weigh a ton, and I have to schlep them up here at some point. Fortunately, this is a basement that has like a hatch. You know, it has like an interior entrance and sort of an exterior like trapdoor thing, so I can bring them around, out and around that way. It may be a little easier. Oh, I don't know. I have no idea. I'll get to it when I get to it. But now, out of the boxes, I've got three really... well, these are really random. Well, we've got letter G, letter H, and letter S. S gets, and I know that the letter S is a bear. If you're in the classical music business, the two killer letters are the letters B, because you've got, Bach, Brahms, Beethoven, and Bachs, and millions of other people, like that, Barber and Berlioz, and, it can be endless, and the letter S. The letter S is lethal because, first of all, you have all the German SCHs, all the people, the Schumanns and Schuberts and Schnittges and Schlubifies and Schreckers and Schulhoff and And then you have all the S's that are just S's, Sibelius and I mean, I can't even think of Shostakovich and the SHs. And, oh, it's a mess. And it's just a mess. So, anyway. There's S everywhere. S everywhere and B everywhere. But today we have G and, like I said, H and we have the S's. Yes, okay. So G, this is quite interesting. This is Alexandre Guilmant. Alexandre Guilmant. Guilmant was the third of the triumvirate of great French 19th century organ composer performers. But no one really knows about Guilmant because no one cares about him anymore. He wrote quite a bit of music. He was quite popular in the United States, actually. He made several trips there. But Widor and Vierne were after Franck, that is. There was Franck, who was Franck. I mean, the Franck, right? But after Franck, you have Widor and Vierne and this guy, Guilmant. That's the post-Franckians, let's call it, although they were contemporaries of Franck, but Franck was older than all of them. Guilmant's actual years were 1837 to 1911. He lived to be quite elderly. He had a very long life, and he wrote 8 organ sonatas, which are major works for the most part, symphonic, quite similar to the Widor organ symphonies. And I think the Widors get more attention because, well, Widor was a better composer in general. I think he was, but Guilmant was quite fine, and but Franck Widor called them symphonies. Well, they were just suites of movements, but he called them symphonies, so that sort of gave him a cachet. Guilmant called them sonatas. He was a little more conservative, and so nobody cares about them. But they're lovely works, and this is on MD and G, the complete of them, and there are 3 discs. Ben van Oosten, with the Cavaillé Cole organ of Saint-Ouen in Rouen, France. It's actually a lovely instrument. And the reason I got into this stuff, and it was really a very fertile ground for exploration, was when I was doing my studies of vibrato in the orchestra to refute all the stupidity being yacked about by so-called experts in the period instrument movement who claimed that orchestras back then didn't play with vibrato. And it turns out, just to summarize briefly, it's a fascinating topic, and I wrote an actual academic paper, which was peer-reviewed and published in a genuine academic journal, and all of that stuff. It turns out that when Aristide Cavaillé-Coll, the great French organist in the 1830s, invented instrumental stops, he created what we might call the orchestral organ, the symphonic organ, for people who couldn't go to see symphony orchestras all the time. These were organs designed to be able to imitate orchestral colors. And this was happening in France largely because a lot of the organ repertoire consisted of even the liturgical repertoire consisted of like opera transcriptions and popular tunes and orchestral music. And so, Cavaillé-Coll invented stops that were named after orchestral instruments. I mean, these had always existed in organ registration. There were flute stops and horn stops and trumpets and whatnot. But string stops were the real kicker because, it's basically a calliope, a wind instrument, cannot really very successfully imitate the sound of strings. And everyone was desperate to do it because strings were, of course, the most expressive instruments, and they played with vibrato, which, of course, the period instrument people denied. But I thought, no, they did, because there was a lot of anecdotal evidence from people commenting that string sections and string players were using vibrato whenever they felt like it. And I thought, well, maybe there is some notational evidence even before the days of recording. And the place to find it would be in the organ literature, because Cavaillé-Coll invented string stops on the organ, pipes that were supposed to imitate the sound of a symphonic string section. And to do that, he added the organ equivalent of vibrato, which suggests, of course, that string sections had a natural level of vibrato. And you can see it in orchestral transcriptions written for these organs that Cavaillé-Coll built. And I did a study of that. It really turned out quite well, actually. It was really fascinating. So one of the things that Guilmant did, to get back to the topic, is he orchestrated some of these things as symphonies. Like the second sonata is his second symphony, or something like that, or the fifth sonata became his second symphony. I don't even remember. But he orchestrated them, and I have the scores. They're all available on Calmus. They're sitting in another box somewhere. And it turns out, of course, that when he wanted to use, this was the opposite way, because he wrote the organ music first. It didn't go the other way. It wasn't orchestral becoming organ music. But it works both ways. So, for example, where he used these vibrato stops in the organ pieces, which he did because he indicated the registration quite carefully, the tremulin or celeste stops, either one, these are the organ's vibrato analogs, and they could be used for all kinds of things, but especially for that, he would write string music where he had the vibrato, because that was what the equivalent was, you see. Anyway, it was very interesting, and here we have the Guilmant Complete Organ Sonatas on M, D, and G, and I've kept them ever since. And once in a while, I even listen to them. It's nice music. They're very enjoyable. They really are, assuming you can tolerate the organ for more than 10 minutes at a time, which I can only do, when there's like a full moon, once in a while. Okay, next, Handel. Well, this is one of my favorite Handel discs that was sitting there. The 4 Coronation Anthems and the fireworks music in the original period instrument wind band recording, which is phenomenally fun. This is with the King's Consort, Robert King, and the choir of New College, Oxford. These are just my favorite recordings of these pieces. At least the Coronation Anthems for sure. The fireworks music, of course, there are quite a few that are wonderful, but I just love it. This is the original. This is claimed to be on Hyperion, by the way. The first recording on period instruments of the original 1749 scoring. Well, whatever that means. 24 oboes, 12 bassoons, 9 trumpets, 9 horns, 4 sets of timpani, and they don't mention, of course, the snare drums and other things that you also need for la réjouissance and some of the other things. The part's not written out. You just have to wing it. But wow, what fun this is. And I love the sonority of period instruments in all of, massed period instruments in this work, because they actually become more mellow the more of them you have. They have this big, fruity, full sound that's just splendid. People, everyone says I don't like period instruments. It's not true. I hate bad performances on period instruments, and because they're so frequent, there are going to be a lot more of those than there are good performances. This is a good one. In all cases, first of all, they have period human voices, right? Yeah, right. They sound marvelous, and the orchestra sounds terrific, and the winds are just windy and fabulous. And it's just a great, great disc. Totally fun. So there's that. Then, oh yes, here we have, you ready? The Christian Thielemann Schumann Symphonies. I pulled out both of these. I pulled out one of them randomly, and I wanted to see if the other one was still attached to it. And yes, they are still together, which they deserve to be, because this I saved as a party record. It is the most horrid, well, You know, there is no bottom. This was the most horrid Schumann cycle ever made, except for the Second Symphony, which was really pretty good. You know, I was able to tolerate that, and I enjoyed it very much when I first heard it, and actually was you know, very complimentary about it in a review. But the others, oh my God, they are as vile, flabby, soggy, limp-wristed, weak-kneed, texturally clogged. Oh, everything that you could do wrong, he does. Sluggish, flaccid. You come up with your adjective. I saved them as party records. I couldn't get rid of them because nothing this bad had ever existed until Thielemann redid the Schumann symphonies on Sony with the Staatskapelle Dresden, an orchestra that should never have a problem because they did the most fabulous Schumann symphonies with Wolfgang Sawallisch, right, on Warner. Well, that remake was even worse, and that was an accomplishment. Like I said, there is no bottom. None whatsoever, although he tried. He tried. This was when I realized that Thielemann was going to be a problematic conductor for me, as for many other people. Just awful. Really awful. He's done some good things in the opera house. He's okay as an accompanist in the standard German repertoire and the, you know, Wagner, Strauss stuff. But as an orchestral conductor, oh my God, it's just awful. And I know he's doing his 5th Bruckner cycle, and, you know, I should listen to some more of it. I heard some of it was horrid. The 4th was just awful. One of you said that the 5th is pretty good. I'm not betting on it, but I will listen to it and find out, because we must never prejudge. But my God, his Schumann was just, I couldn't believe it. Could not believe how bad this was. And it still is, and I'm saving it forever. Just as an example, when people say, well, how do you tell a good performance from a bad performance? I can go, there it is. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.